I've talked to a couple of people in some relationships that they're getting out of about um, moving on. And so in this recording, I want to discuss karma lines and how basically people that you know are often replacements or slot fillers for other people that you've known who are very similar. In this particular recording here, I'll talk about how to understand karma lines and how to replace them when they go bad. So, different people tend to have the same kind of energy. That is, people that you know reflect how you see the world. A lot of this depends on your genetic tendencies because basically your genes have certain kinds of prompts. Under stress, you're going to have stuff happen in your body. Under stimulation, you're going to have stuff in your body. But you've also got personality traits. You've got ways to integrate defense mechanisms in response to certain kinds of insults or whatever. Now, as we learn, certain people pick up threat from certain kinds of things, while other people pick up threat from other kinds of things. And so the interplay of genetics and training is going to tell us how we interface with folks. Now, each person that we interact with, or a slot, captures several traits that our brains have learned to recognize. So, for example, as you grow up in life, you will more likely identify certain people as smart or queenly or being villains or an ideal beauty or whatever. And you'll have a construct for these things, and your brain will go in and say, hey, I have recognized this snob here. And but the thing is, as your brain learns to recognize the snob, it also recognizes certain traits that come with being a snob. And so even when this guy leaves your life, you're going to get somebody else in your life who fulfills this snob role because your brain is like, hey, he has the same height, he has the same kind of body, he's got the same kind of demeanor, he's going to be a snob too. And this is where we get the idea of slot fillers. So, but another thing to note here is that even though you may have certain constructs for these people, another person may see these same people entirely differently. So you call this first guy here a brainiac, but your friend over here calls that other person smart. You say, what's the difference? Well, they have different connotations. Brainiac is, it's a little bit too smart to be socially acceptable. Smart is just smart, right? Or maybe you know this friend of yours as villainous, but this other guy doesn't know that guy at all. He's only seen such characters on TV. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, the thing about words is that we're all given basic usages of those words. And so the way we use queenly, the way we're all trained to think of the word queenly means something. So if person A says, oh yeah, this individual Elizabeth over here is queenly, but person B says Elizabeth is refined, it influences how they respond cognitively to their idea of Elizabeth. So by me saying Elizabeth is queenly, I may be recognizing that she deserves respect. But by you saying Elizabeth is refined, I may recognize that she has proper manners that I need to appreciate. The moral of the story here is that you and I see the same person differently, and we assign different labels, meaning that we have different behaviors that come out for the same person. Now, when you have traits like this, it's not just a matter of describing them in terms of words. What I showed on the previous slide is that the words basically imply certain sets of actions on my part. When I call you a brainiac, it means that there is a family of actions that I have on my part. But that's going to be the case for all these guys, except as time goes on, certain among these people will leave my life, and I'll still need someone to represent a brainiac, and I'll still need someone to represent an ideal beauty. And maybe those two traits, brainiac and ideal beauty, get merged into this new person that I meet called brains and beauty. And maybe my villainous queenly labels get merged into this new person I meet called evil princess. But I still know the same snob. He's just the same dude that he's always been. Okay, so the point is that we have these ideas of certain traits possessed by people, but we can assemble those traits together into compound groups and embody them all in a single person. Now, you also tend to merge when you get into important relationships like boyfriends, girlfriends, husbands, and wives. When you get into really big relationships, your significant other often, I often is the inclusion of a whole bunch of different traits. So whereas all five of these friends of yours here used to have a certain kind of characteristic to each of them, your new girlfriend has all those characteristics, and all five of your friends just kind of go away. That happens in certain kinds of major relationships. Now, those are merges, but sometimes traits split up. And so maybe Cleopatra here was my girlfriend, but we broke up. And once we broke up, all of her traits of being a brainiac, villainous, queenly, ideal beauty, and a snob um, basically were distributed among other people. So now she's my ex-girlfriend, and I still see her as a snob. But I go to this new set of friends, and I interact with her as more queenly instead, her as the ideal beauty instead, him as the villain, and him as the brainiac, because Cleopatra is no longer as important to me in my life. That's a split. Okay, by the way, when we deal with these kinds of traits, they don't always have to apply to people. So a job can have a certain kinds of stable characteristic. I got my older job, my old job, and my new job, and I've got a certain family of dynamics that pops up there. Or I've got my friends. This guy here, he's a merge of my snob and my brainiac, and so this guy is my snob brainiac. And then I've got this other dude who is my regular villainous friend. Now, I can have people embody certain traits, or I can have jobs embody certain traits, but in today's social media entertainment heavy world, I often have traits being represented in other places. So I've got my advertisements telling me what Queenly is all about. I've got my Netflix telling me what ideal beauty is about. And so in real life, I could know someone who is an ideal beauty, or instead of knowing that person, I simply watch the ideal beauty on TV. This will come back. This will come back to us. But the point is that in today's information heavy world, our ideas about things can get really, really crowded because you go onto Facebook and Facebook is telling you what's important in politics and what a real leader is and what a real sports star is and what a real company set of actions is supposed to look like. And so we're going to get confused with all these noise. Um, sometimes. And many of my ideal friends, by the way, my friends and my dreams are locked in all of this information. Just note that because whereas before all of the internet stuff got super big, we used to have communities and you'd have groups of maybe 5 or 6 friends or whatever. We find that in today's society, the number of friends shrinks and the number of images about who those friends should be grows. Okay, what are karma lines? Karma lines are chains of people, places, or situations that bring out similar behaviors in us. So you can give names to these lines. I have, for example, the Queen karma line. This is basically a group of people who demand my obedience. So when I'm really, really young, like I'm a kid and I don't really know queens, I may just know my diva cat. I'll call her Diva, right? She's really prissy, and she just acts like she's entitled to royal service. Later on in my life, Diva died, and I met my high school English teacher, and she was very, very queenly, maybe. Um, Now, I graduated from high school, but when I graduated, I went to college. I met Cleopatra here. Um, Cleopatra kept my high school teacher's demanding traits, but my high school teacher's manners went elsewhere because Cleopatra was kind of rude, maybe. And instead, uh, Basically, the high school teacher split up her traits, and her demandingness went into this new person that I met, and her manners went into this other dude, my polite college advisor. And he was a merge of manners and cool niceness, a trait which I had picked up in high school from my science teacher, basically. Now, my polite college advisor in this example, uh, he's just doing his thing. He's cool, he's nice, he has manners, and I know him through all my college years. But at some point in my college years, I broke up with Cleopatra, and I learned that she took over my world, and she was also demanding. And I could replace her not necessarily with a person, but with a job. So maybe I ended up working at this job that was as demanding as Cleopatra was. But she took over my world, and the job took over my world too. What a bummer. After a while, I graduated from college. I left that job, and thank goodness I met my new boss. Now, Cleopatra had a couple of bad traits here. Um, Her demandingness went over to my current boss, but the world takeover went to my new job, which I guess I kind of like. And the manners from my college professor got transferred to my current boss, and so now my current boss is Princess Peach. She's very nice, and my current job is kind of cool, so it gets to take over my world. This is what happens. And what you see here is that lines can cross and they can distribute different kinds of traits. Why did we go over this? Like, why did we talk about this example? The idea is that when you meet people, although it's true that people can have different traits and absorb different traits and mix them and merge them and all that, um, you basically have different different experiences which stay fairly constant as themes in your life. Okay, so why would we merge lines? We merge lines when we get into important relationships and we want to combine all kinds of traits into a single person. Or maybe we're moving to a new place. We're meeting new allies. And whereas we had 10 friends back home, we only have 2 now. And so those 2 are going to have to be the funny person, the tour guide, the knowledgeable person, and everything all combined. Maybe we're working on a big project. I've had this happen before. You're working on a big project or a big challenge, and you need to focus your attention. That's another reason to merge because you don't have time to run around with 20 different people. You just have this project team of 4 or 5 people, and they have to embody everything. Another reason to merge is that we just plain demand that certain traits get gathered all in one place. Maybe there's that person we love, maybe there's that person that gives us security, or that person that we have fun with, and we just want them all to be combined into a boyfriend or a girlfriend. Why would we split lines? I think the reason for splitting is actually more interesting. We split lines because of a breakup or death or distancing ourselves from friends. That is, a friend will have several traits like being funny or good or gentle. And once we break up with them, we need to have our funniness from one friend. We have to have our goodness from some other person, and our gentleness from some other person. So if we're moving away from a place, or we're scattering behaviors, or we're traveling, or we're demanding that we can turn off certain kinds of traits while keeping others on. It's the main reason why you split lines. Uh, because maybe you've got somebody who's both funny and serious, and after a while you get tired of that, and you just want your funny person to be funny and your serious person to be serious, and you want them to operate independently. You may break up with that person who's both funny and serious and adopt true friends instead, one who's funny and one who's serious. Maybe friendship and business, fun, busyness, and romance are things that you want to split up. Okay, so how do you take control of your lines? Well, so you can take control of your lines by following 3 rules. First, you recognize the line and give it a name. Second, you decide how you want the line to change. So for example, if I'm on the queen line and I am interfacing with a girlfriend or somebody who acts like a queen, but I don't like her. I don't like Cleopatra anymore. How do I get away from Cleopatra and yet I'm not going to say guarantee, but introduce a strong likelihood that I will find a better replacement? Well, these are my rules. I recognize the line she's on and name it, and then I will decide how I want the line to change. Maybe I want her to be less rude. And third, I treat the current occupant according to the new standard. Now, that's going to be tricky sometimes because you can do all kinds of things to treat them according to the new standard. You can block them, dump them, talk it out, hang out, or whatever. The thing you need to remember, though, is that when you take control of your lines and you try to kick somebody off a line and replace them with somebody else, the next person is going to pick up where you left the old person. So if you thought that Cleopatra was a royal handful and you start treating Cleopatra rudely, what's going to happen is that if you break up with Cleopatra in a rude way, Cleopatra's replacement, let's just call her, I don't know, Hera, is going to not necessarily behave in Cleopatra's way, but you as a person are going to remember how you just treated Cleopatra, and so you're going to start Hera off in a deficit. So that's the thing you need to watch out for when you replace people on your karma lines. Now, let me give an example of these rules in action by using a video game. I know this may seem nerdy to some people, but it's actually a very interesting game series, I should say, and it's what got me into the idea of karma lines. For the PlayStation, there's a game series called Suikoden. It's based on a Chinese tale of the water margin. Basically, a group of bandits lead an uprising and rebel against what they see as an oppressive kingdom. And there are a whole bunch of characters involved here, and they lead their rebellion. Now, in the video game series, they basically adapt this old Chinese story, and they have you play as the rebel group. But the rebel group, interestingly, has all kinds of game characters which correspond to those in the Chinese book. And they have different roles. So in Suikoden 1, this is your hero. In Suikoden 2, here's your hero. In Suikoden 3, here's your main hero. Here's the Suikoden 4 hero, and here's the Suikoden 5 hero in the game. You can see that they have, I'm not going to say similar-ish kinds of traits, but they all, well, yeah, they have similar-ish kinds of traits. And here are their names. The game hero, Tyr, Ryo, Thomas, and so on. Okay. You also have a group of strategists. This is the strategists from the first game, the second, the third, the fourth, and the fifth. Now, the interesting thing about this is that the games change, but the basic roles stay the same. In every game, you will always have a chief strategist, which would be the name of this line here. You will always have a game hero, which is the name of this line here, and so on. In your actual life, you may always have the funny person. You may always have the mother figure. You may always have the boss figure. By recognizing the line that you're on, you can begin to take control of those lines. Then, for the second step, you decide on the change that you want. So in the game, the first three strategists were men, but the last two strategists in Suikoden 4 and 5 were women. Now, when you decide on the change, you may make decisions by saying this person needs to be more polite, or this person needs to appreciate my work. You can make all kinds of demands, telling yourself how the person who is currently occupying this role in your life needs to be different. So the thing is, these are changes in interaction. You basically say, I've got this friend of mine, and they need to change in this particular way. But interaction's not the only thing you can change. Here's something interesting. When you have an interaction with a particular karma line, you also have certain forms. So you may find that this particular slot, the funny person, is always a woman. Maybe they're usually tall. Maybe they're Latino or Latina. Those kinds of things. They take a certain shape. They take a certain visual kind of form. You might have certain interactions which are typically a job. Maybe they're not a person. Or maybe they are a person who has mother issues. Whatever. The point is that your interaction helps determine the shape of things. Why would a particular interaction always show up as that white guy or that black lady? Why would they do that? Well, it's because we've learned behavior. Our brains and our history responds to certain ideas in similar clusters. If we think that the queenly person is always going to be somebody who is relatively arrogant and oldish, then every time we meet a relatively arrogant oldish person, it's going to be easier to call them a queen. Now, here are some common forms. A lot of people may contest these things, and it's just oversimplification, but some of the forms that our karma lines can take are based heavily on our stereotypes. If you get a particular slot, let's say your boss person is always male, what does it mean that they're always male? Males are biologically expected to assert first, and they're socially trained to react. Females are biologically expected to react first, and socially trained to assert. So, one receives what's going on in the world and then reacts. The other one makes stuff appear in the world and then takes in the receipt. If someone is tall, then by looking at them, we can assume their power based on their presence. If they're short, we have to kind of investigate their face or their mannerisms or their communication style. And if they're normal, we don't know until they tell us. There are some ethnic superclasses. Again, these are based on stereotypes, but some of the heavier behaviors that come with different ethnicities. Let's say your brainiac person is always a particular race. Maybe they're Asian, maybe they're black, or whatever. What do these superclasses tend to imply? If you're Asian, there tends to be a vertical member group focus, like tradition and authority, or structure, or stuff like that. It's very stereotyped, and this is in the West. If you've got somebody in your life who frequently shows up as a black person, black typically brings out the intensity in other people. Hispanic brings out a focus on family or friends, horizontal folks, right? Not lineage, not your grandfathers or those guys, but like your friends or your sisters or your brothers or your mom and your dad, that kind of family. Indian brings out people's, and this is Indian from India, brings out people's focus on relationships, interaction, or spirituality. A person who shows up as Middle Eastern, according to the Western stereotypical media training, brings out our focus on belief systems. When you have somebody in your life who shows up as Middle Eastern, you're typically more likely to be prompted to think about what you believe. There's Native Americans, brings out our attention to the environment or land or history. And if a person frequently shows up in your world as white, then they tend to be individualism focused and tend to be less likely to see color in terms of their interaction. So they're less likely to classify using all these other guys. If someone has a heavy build, they are more known for their presence in more events. But if they have a thin build, they're more likely to limit stuff in their lives. And you can see some other attributes as well. Someone who's beautiful tends to have higher social mobility. They tend to be invited to more places and move more easily. A lot of this is based on research as well. I just didn't include it in the PowerPoint because it would have weighed it down, but you have that. Someone who is strong may have a higher intimidation factor among strangers. If they have body tone, like they're cut or they're muscular, they're assumed to have more discipline. And then there's the stuff on round faces and thin faces. Lastly, certain forms are people, and we're going to interact with these. Others are places. Some are jobs. You can have tasks, work, projects, things you create, and children. You can also have music, TV, and entertainment. These are different kinds of forms that slots occupy in your world. And you also have stuff in your own personality. In your own personality, you may have traits like being the generous one that you simply overshadow other people in, and you're just not going to give them away. Okay, so it's worth noting in Suikoden that the first 3 strategists in the 3 games were male, and then in the last 4, they were women. We talked about how the the women are biologically trained to react first and then assert socially. And anybody who's played the circuit and series knows that in the first 3 games, the strategist's ego was more of a bigger factor, but in the last 2 games, it was less about their ego and more about how cunning these strategists were. You can have a slot that changes form. Although you typically have the form stay the same, you can have a person morph into a job. Okay, so the third thing you do in order to manage your karma lines is to treat the slot differently. Let's say you finally want to break up with that boyfriend of yours. Uh, your boyfriend was fun, but he was a snob and he was a jerk. What do? Maybe you want him to go away. How do you get over him quickly? Well, one option is to take his attributes and split him up. So you have fun with a new person. You look out for a different kind of snob, and you look for his snob qualifications. Or you can become the snob yourself. In other words, you take his traits from him and you put them in other sections of your world. And then finally, if you wanted the boyfriend to vanish, you just dump him. Another option is to dump him, but help your friend deal with jerks like him instead. So maybe you're so tired, you're so done with this jerk boyfriend, but and you do want him to go away, but you're just drawn to this kind of jerk personality. Okay, well, if you have to absolutely get your fill of the jerk, then maybe you'll just help someone else deal with their version of him. Okay, now, but what if you're stuck on a slot? Sometimes, and the reason I've recorded this PowerPoint is to help people who are stuck on a particular thing. Maybe they're stuck in a job, or they're stuck in a relationship, or maybe they've broken up from a relationship and they're stuck on the person that they broke up with. Okay, well, before we talk about handling being stuck, we need to know that there's some traits that we're just never going to give away. They're always ours. And there are other traits that we'll always give away. They're always someone else's. If you're stuck on a particular slot, oftentimes you're wishing certain things were different, but they're not going to be different because the traits are traits that describe your regular training. So that's tough. You need to know what is changeable and what isn't in terms of who you think you are. So, but one thing is true. We talked about how you can have certain desires embedded in social media, right? If you can think of it, you can have it. If you can see it on TV and you can frame it properly, you can have it. It's kind of like The Secret, right? What you do if you're stuck on a slot is extract the traits that you want from your karma lines. So, for example, let's say you're stuck in a bad job and you know that your ideal job exists on a TV show. Well, the first thing you do is you find all the traits that come with the job on that TV show. So you say, "Yeah, man, I'm looking at this job. I think it'd be awesome to have it. It allows travel, money, and fun. But I'm stuck. All I can do is just see it on TV. I can't get that job for myself." Well, the first thing you do is you split the TV show line. You're like, "Okay, let me try to change things." And what I'll do is I'll look at my favorite job, and then I'll take all the qualities, the main qualities that describe it, and find them in other things. So I'm going to plan what kind of fun I'll have with my next most fun person. I may not be able to have this job where I can just go on my yacht all day, but maybe I have a friend who, wants to float the river or whatever. Okay, cool. It's not quite a yacht, but uh, it's fun, and I'm going to go hang out with them. You might download pictures, visit, or pin the things that you would buy with your money if you want money to be associated with you. For whatever reason, I find Pinterest to be really, really useful. And I think there's something about Pinterest which amounts to you declaring to strangers in the world stuff that you like, images that you like. It's very different from Facebook. Facebook, you're just talking shit or whatever you're doing. But with Pinterest, you're like, look, this is the most badass car I have ever seen in my life. And anybody who agrees can pin it to. Um, so, for dreams and what you would do with money, I would recommend going on something visual that other people can really say an amen to. Um, you can find ways to travel virtually or at least get the information. Now, look, this is not going to give you your ideal job, but what it is going to do is make the things associated with your ideal job more real. Okay, now what about breakups? This is a different kind of being stuck. When you break up with somebody, do you tell them, let's just be friends? Do you block them completely? Or do you fight them? Like, what do you do in order to break up with somebody in a slot or to get over that slot? Unfortunately, I often find that I have to block people because I forgive too easily. And if somebody has become um, kind of a burden to me in my life, I know that if they ever came back to me and said, hey, Ajani, uh, be my friend again, it's all good, right? I'd be like, yeah, all right, because I'm easy like that. And in order to protect myself, I actually have to block them a lot. But you can decide on whatever you want to do. Just know that however you want to change your slot, you need to, it helps to decide how you want that slot to change first. Because if before you break up, you don't do this, you're just like, screw it, I'm tired. Um, and you don't really know why, you just know that that person got on your nerves. Um, you'll often find that once the breakup is done, you look back and you're like, dude, that's like the second or third or fourth time I've broken up with somebody like that. And it's because you didn't say, I'm tired of this person, he needs to be more polite. You simply said, I'm tired of this person. And so the next person you get is like, well, I'm still drawn to that person in the first place, but I never asked for any improvements in my own mind. So you want to know what you want the person you're splitting up with to do. And then you take the next nearest person and rebuild from there. This is basically karma lines. Um, when you're dealing with people, people have traits, and those traits occupy slots. A good way to kind of control those slots is to know what you're dealing with and decide what you want. It's not always going to be the case that you can just take that not so good girlfriend or boyfriend and swap them out for somebody perfect. It's often the case that you're going to take that not so good girlfriend or boyfriend and simply dump them and then divide up all the cool traits that they had amongst people that you knew until the next boyfriend or girlfriend comes in. That's a lot of the way that you handle karma lines. I talk about this in my book, Gamified Spirit, and you can find it on Lulu. Basically, I discuss in there a way to make a video game type avatar for yourself in a way that helps you tackle your dreams and your spirituality and all that other stuff. It's certainly good for handling places where you are stuck in a particular interaction that you need to grow from. But good luck with all this. People who are in bad relationships or people who are stuck, I urge you to, take some time to look at the thing that has you stuck and think about all the interactions that come with it and find better ones. Good luck to you.